if you're in a pitch process, make sure that you put your talent forward. Don't hide behind something, because you also want to feel out that relationship and make sure that it's right, because sometimes you just need to have good vibes, especially when you're creative problem solving. You want to make sure that you get someone that you're on the same page with and can help you work through problems.
This is You Should Talk To, a podcast for busy marketing leaders who are looking for support and tips on getting shit done. In each episode, Daniel Weiner interviews marketing leaders and discusses their experience, successes, and failures around hiring agencies. If you're interested in finding and choosing the right agency partner, then let's jump in.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the You Should Talk To podcast. I am Daniel Weiner, and this podcast is brought to you by You Should Talk To and myself. You Should Talk To pairs brands and marketers for free with vetted agencies and or freelancers for pretty much any marketing or tech need, because finding great agencies is a pain in the ass. Super excited to be joined by the second Clemson alumni who's been on my podcast. Shout out Alan McGee. Kammie Kasten, who is Director of Marketing at FireRock Building Materials. Kammie, how the hell are you?
I'm great. I'm still adjusting to standard time, I guess is what we're on now. So yeah, like 3 or 4 cups of coffee deep, over caffeinated, underfed, ready to go.
Excited to be here, I hope, as well.
Yeah, of course. Always excited to talk to you.
That's the spirit. Kammie, let's start with a little bit of controversy. What is an unpopular marketing opinion of yours, or a hot take of sorts?
So now that I'm not in like a marketing organization, I might not be totally up on what the current controversies are. And I'm a marketing department of 2, me and a coordinator. But in my past experience, I think brand marketing doesn't get the credit that it deserves. Brand marketing in the digital space in particular, I think people are always looking for a cost per acquisition measurement. And unless you're using like a mixed media model that can measure all those touch points that somebody might have in the journey, it's not giving a fair. And even then, there's limitations to that, but it's not giving fair credit to brand marketing efforts that are not necessarily driven at, new accounts or phone calls at the bottom of the funnel. So I still love brand marketing. Maybe that's a little bit of my background, but I think it's valuable. I think it's also valuable with younger generations who value the ethics of an organization, and they want to know that they're supporting an organization that aligns with their values. So I don't think it's something worth neglecting. Is that controversial?
I think brand marketing is having a really good week. I don't know if you saw Airbnb posted like a whole thing about like how they've invested in brands. I think when big companies with big names take note, but you actually, you didn't see the LinkedIn post I made today that I tagged you in before this, did you? I'm assuming
I've not been on LinkedIn this morning.
I was going to say, it's very controversial now. I basically was talking about like how, I guess it pertains to brand, like how we hadn't really talked since college, and consistency of like content and stuff like that. You knew exactly what I did and reached out, which I would argue is the power of brand as well. Not that I am Airbnb, but, stuck in your mind, you presumed I was not a total shithead or monster and reached out and, we're interested in chatting about your agency needs. So I'm all for brand. What I would throw back to you is, which is probably a question you don't have the answer to, but I'll put you on the spot. If somebody pushed back, say a C-suite member regarding like measuring brand and stuff like that, what would your answer to that be if someone's dealing with that internally at the moment?
I have been in that experience. So I worked for super regional bank for a time in my career. So we had that experience of wanting to advocate for investment in the brand and potentially wanting to increase spend in brand or do more in the digital space with brand. But because it didn't drive to the bottom of the funnel and it didn't drive for new accounts, it was really hard to advocate for that. So if you're struggling with that, you can always try to run a test, but you have to be able to set up metrics that are specific to brand. And that can be challenging because awareness isn't a very sexy metric. So I have run into that. And basically all we did was advocate for test and learn agendas specific to certain channels, testing different messages, testing different journeys, things like that. But it's tough when you're dealing with publicly traded organizations or people, privately owned organizations that have financial stakeholders. They want to see the metrics that move the needle, and they don't realize that investing in the top of the funnel really can impact the bottom of the funnel at the end of the day.
Yeah, I can remember.
But huge organizations like Airbnb and You Should Talk to investing in brand marketing are going to make a difference.
I would definitely say I'm shocked that they didn't reach out to me for comment, truthfully, in that article.
Right?
We're definitely on par, I would say, revenue-wise and just corporate structure,
Right.
It's funny, in my former agency, I can remember being in meetings where like a brand we were, prospecting would say like, oh, our goals are awareness. And we'd be like, oh, thank God. Because we knew it was kind of like BS, like, great, we're not going to be able to measure this. And they'd be like, yeah, we know. We're like, oh, thank God we can do anything. Like, this is wonderful.
Right. Right. And it is important as like a brand or as a marketer to know how to hold your agencies accountable, because I've definitely been in that role where you're like, I can say anything. I can be like, look at the reach. So many impressions.
Impressions, eyeballs.
I know. But also, if you want to advocate for brand marketing, you've got to work with your agency to figure out how to get more valuable media. Like, what is a more measurable channel or a way for us to prove this? Find a partner. We worked with Nielsen on an influencer effort. So that was one of the tools that we used to try to prove out the value of working with like influencers for your brand. So
sweet. For those who have not heard of FireRock Building Materials, tell us a little bit about it.
So our legacy product is pre-engineered manufactured fireplaces. So we manufacture those out of a plant here in Fairfield, Alabama. We were started in Atlanta. We purchased and moved to Birmingham 15 years ago. Since then, we've also added wet cast concrete pavers to our manufactured products. And then we partner with some manufacturers to sell through steel doors and windows, slate and cedar roofing, and hardwood floors. So all of these typically going into, they're more expensive options. So typically going into high-end homes. Based in Birmingham, a very large footprint across the Southeast with representatives across the Southeast, but we also have representatives in California and several in Texas. And we sell nationwide, though.
And you focus on both direct sales and through distributors and partners and stuff like that?
Yeah. So our manufactured products are sold through distribution as well as direct sales, depending on the market. Largely direct sales. And then all steel doors and windows, flooring and roofing is sold direct. So it's a balance there. Those are two very different audiences. They have similar needs, obviously, but they're very different between distributors and architects and builders. So
sure. How's supply chain stuff affecting your marketing efforts? Is it having? I don't want to trigger you. If you need like a cigarette, feel free to grab one. It's
not like, for us being manufactured for our two main products, our pavers and our fireplaces, we have been impacted by some of them, but with like getting our materials. But we've been able to pivot, find new suppliers. But yeah, people tend to want to blame the brand and not the bigger picture. So At the end of the day, like, you're kind of the throat to choke. So prayers for our customer service team when that happens. But I think when it comes to our manufactured products, it's been manageable. But yeah, it's tough.
Are you turning on and off marketing efforts, or it hasn't had that sort of granular effect?
So I started at FireRock in July, but my predecessor did not turn on and off marketing efforts. We just stayed steady because we are looking, especially with like distributor, we're looking for them to stock products, not necessarily, we're not manufacturing on demand, which is
that's when you flip on those brand efforts,
Yep.
You've had a bunch of interesting experience, including big agency experience, and now you switch to the brand side. Do you think that experience has made you more sympathetic to the woes of agencies? Has it made you a better partner to agencies?
Yeah, I like to tell my agency partners that I'm not a regular client, I'm a cool client.
Wow.
I know, a really good millennial mom joke right there. But I think at the end of the day, it makes me sympathetic, but it also makes me a better partner and a more accountable marketer, because I've seen the inside, I've seen the spin machine. I can sort of sniff out a turd. But I also think it means that I know how to approach an agency. I think oftentimes when I was on the agency side, clients came to us without even really knowing what their problem was or what they were trying to solve for. They just knew that their product wasn't selling, or they had an awareness issue. And they'd come to us with these really big questions. And a lot of times you go through a discovery phase of trying to understand what their problem is, and you realize it's something that's not within your realm of experience. It's not an agency problem, but you're going to then spin and try to change the perception of a brand when they have a quality issue, or, they have an internal culture issue. You can't solve for those things. So I think I am able to get to know us as an organization and identify our needs and go specifically to the agencies with a directive and not ask for them to solve our problems, if that makes sense.
It does. I'm guessing it's positive then to my next question, your overall opinion on agencies, because even though I work primarily with them, they get I say a bad rep, but like an interesting rep. Everybody's had, a super negative experience and a super positive experience typically. And some people are just very like adamant about working with agencies or attempting to not. Are you very, pro or, talk me through that a little bit? Just your overall opinion on agencies.
I think some of the smartest people will ever know, I met through my agency experience because they're problem solvers. And so that's why they're in that role, is they're constantly getting a chance to dig into new challenges and think through new creative solutions. And so I'm a big fan of them. I think that they get a bad rap from people that are distrustful of it, or maybe because by people that don't feel like they were validated by what the outcome was, which again goes back to making sure you know your organization and you know what you're trying to solve for when you approach an agency.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. To that end, are you, I find typically folks with your title, Director of Marketing, VP of Marketing, CMO, are getting hit up essentially every 12 seconds by vendors, technology providers, agencies. Yeah. Is that the case for you?
Yeah. Like 50 emails a day or something like that. And I would say that almost every single one of them probably needs to change their email marketing strategy.
I used to do it more. I don't do it now as much because I'm more sympathetic towards salespeople. But I oftentimes will reply when I get something like that I've just been prospected miserably. Like, hey, if you all need an email marketing agency, like, let me know. I know a guy.
Got a little experience, got some connections. So yeah, you should do that.
Is there anything in cold outreach that an agency or vendor can do to get your attention? In, the most common answer here is like, if it's just the most timely thing, if I'm looking for X vendor and X vendor reaches out, like I'm happy, that's usually the only thing. Is there anything for you that somebody can do to stand out or separate themselves from the pack?
Yeah. I mean, I think timely, the luck of the draw somewhat has been true, but also if the initial email is somewhat customized, you've done a little bit of research on our organization and our marketing efforts so that it's not just a form filled out and with my name put in and my company put in. And then you follow up and say like, just following up on the below, did you have any questions? Yeah. A little bit of personalization can go a long way.
I tell everybody, this is your chance. Like, if wine is your thing, here's the chance to plug it. What can somebody send you in the mail to get your attention? Everybody loves a care package. So you can think through that for the rest of the podcast, if there's something you want to get this holiday season, especially.
I did have a vendor who I really liked her, but she did always show up she always brought me a bottle of wine. And at Christmas, she sent me really nice candles, which I loved. I was like, it wasn't branded. It wasn't another tchotchke. It was something that was really nice. And I think based on the fact that she knew I was like a 30-something woman who was going to like a nice candle. So not just
I'm a 30-something male and I love a nice candle. Thank you very much. I showed up to truthfully like basically every meeting of my life at my former agency with baked goods. I would find out what they liked and get that. And once it's an excellent strategy. I encourage everybody, like, food is the universal language. And even if you're going to a meeting that somebody's going to be pissed off at, they're going to be less pissed off with a cupcake in their hand, or a muffin or a bagel or something. I'm being 100%. I know we're joking, but like, I'm so serious. They're meetings where I'm like, God, they're going to like be pissed or we're doing this. It just takes the pressure off of you. Like, I've been in pitch situations.
Everyone in a better mood. They feel appreciated. It eases the tension. A little carbs go a long way.
I've won pitches in business where people have referenced the food before they're like, oh man, those cupcakes. Oh yeah, by the way, like, we want to work with you. I'm like, geez, can we lead with that? Like, that was the more important part, I think. So yes, for anybody listening out there looking for a new sales strategy, it's food first.
Food first. Carbs specifically.
When we first reconnected a couple months back, I would say that you, at least in our first meeting, had probably like a little bit, I don't know if it's a preconceived notion or what, but like you came in thinking like maybe you guys weren't going to be able to work with agencies or like really great agencies due to the size of your business and like budgets you were hoping to spend. So I want to talk a little bit about that process and us working together and stuff. So I'll kick it off from your side. Like, when you first came to me, I believe that first call, you're like, oh, like, we're tiny, we're small fries, like no one's going to want to work with us. Not exactly those words, but talk me through that. Like, when you first reached out, what you were thinking.
Yeah, I mean, our marketing budget is smaller.
Everything's relative, Kammie.
Everything is relative. You're right. I haven't worked in an agency in 4 years. that right? Something like that. So I wasn't sure what, like, we needed a new website. So if anybody listening to this podcast goes and checks FireRock out, it's coming. We needed a new website. I just didn't know what the cost of that would be to get a good quality product. And then with media and performance media, I just wasn't sure we had enough money for it. I was thinking we would go full service agency because we could get efficiencies if we were able to package several services with one agency. And I didn't end up doing that. I also, because I came from full service agencies and then going to a bank that had like 7 to 10 agencies for like every single thing that we did, for whether it was traditional media, digital media, content, email, PR. I mean, we had agencies for everything. I just had a little bit of PTSD from trying to get agencies to collaborate. And so I went in it wanting one agency. And Danny, you didn't talk me out of it. We talked about it a lot because we ended up going with a specialized media agency that was performance media, basically, again, which is funny for me to be like, I advocated for brand marketing and I went with a performance media agency, but I do the brand marketing. Me and my coordinator manage all of our brand marketing efforts ourselves. And then a separate digital agency that really impressed us and showed in the process that they were taking the time, even just in pitching for our business, they got to know our business and they did a really good job listening. So I don't even remember what your original question was, but yeah, I think I came into this with like some preconceived notions about the quality of what we could get if we had enough money to work with a good agency, and then the type of agency I won. And I was proven wrong about the budget, and then I have been really satisfied with the results.
Yeah, I think with the budget thing, it's super relative. And I find truthfully people with your specific experience who've come from a larger agency, who's used to working with, again, everything's relative, but larger budgets, just kind of assumes that it's hard to find quality, which is why, like, when you came to me, even just on this podcast now, like, budgets are all relative. I get people all the time who are like, hey, Danny, like, we need X, Y, and Z. Our budget's tiny. I'm like, what is it? They're like, a paltry $1 million. I'm like, what? I'm like, what? I'm like, that's huge. And, in my world, like, what are we talking about? Like, oh, like, is it? I'm like, yeah, my agency partners will like come mow your lawn and like provide childcare for those sorts of budgets. So I think
we're all looking for free childcare.
I know. That's why I think it's interesting. Like, my biggest feedback that I give to agencies I work with as well is like, know your audience as well, know where they came from, know their experience, know their background, know what they're looking for, and like what's important to them. Because a lot of people I think assume they can't get certain things. The question of like full service versus breaking it up, like I can't remember how we necessarily arrived to that, but it's so situational. Like you sometimes get economies of scale by working with one agency. It really just depends like on the combination of services and the scenario. That's why like when people reach out to me and they're like, oh, like I need an agency, if they're not willing to chat, it's really hard for me. Like I won't make an intro if somebody won't have like a discovery call with me, because I got to talk through and like see what they're hoping to do even.
Yeah. I think we got there just because you brought forward a performance agency, strictly media, and just thought I should talk to them. At the end of the day, they just said the right things and they had the right concept of our business and that they were really going to spend our budget efficiently. And when you only have, or when you feel like you don't have a lot of money, you want to make sure that it's spent really wisely. And in the digital space, we do need it to be more bottom of the funnel and intentional. And our audiences are smaller too, right? So we can do brand marketing in the right spaces like print and trade shows and things like that. But at the end of the day, I think our digital budget was spent better there. And so they said the right things and they understood our business. And then the same thing was true with the partner we picked for website development, is that they took the time to really get to know our challenges. They introduced us to the whole team. One thing that I'm wary of is anybody that has you just working with their new business director or like one leader in the agency and not introducing you to their team. That's kind of a red flag. So for your agencies that are listening, if you're in a pitch process, make sure that you put your talent forward. Don't hide behind something, because you also want to feel out that relationship and make sure that it's right. Because sometimes you just need to have good vibes, especially when you're creative problem solving. You want to make sure that you get someone that you're on the same page with and can help you work through problems. So
you definitely wanted good vibes. I believe on the first call, you were like, oh, you're like the Tinder for marketing and we are looking for good vibes. Yeah. I was like, I don't know if that's a compliment or not, but I'll take it. Let's go with that. Right. That'll be my next tagline.
my geography too, right? So you work with partners all over the country. I would have been more limited to just sort of what I knew because I wasn't going to do a whole RFP. So I was sort of just going to be working with partners and other friends in marketing on the agencies that they knew. And you obviously have like a really great database of partners and resources. And I think you use that judgment of sort of my energy to put forward partners that you thought would be good collaborators with me and our needs, not just our business, but also like personalities.
So much personality driven. I've also seen, truthfully, like, especially since COVID, and it's probably my experience of coming from a smaller agency, is that bigger brands are growing tired of working with bigger agencies. And it's not like a capability thing. It's largely process and just how nimble smaller agencies are versus the big machine of a big, oftentimes publicly traded company. Have you seen that from either people you know or just in the market?
I guess so. Are you seeing that across all service lines from like media to brand and creative and digital?
I am in general. Yeah. Like the AOR model is going away, but less like that. It's more like, hey, we just can't wait like a perfect example of a company I talked to recently who works with a very large named agency was like, oh, they told us it was going to be a month to like resize some stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know what that means. Like, I could probably resize this today if you sent it to me. I don't even know how to use Photoshop. Like I could figure it out in Canva if I had to. Like that's just not the norm in my world. But it is, like that's the norm for people who are working oftentimes at big brands. Like that's just what they're used to. And I think in the post-COVID world, like talent is everywhere, and it kind of democratized it. Like people are like, oh, like there's not just talent in New York or LA or Chicago and big markets, so it's more like the people side. And truthfully, I think the agencies that are poised for success, which is why I try to work with only independent agencies, is like, if you're able to be nimble and meet your clients, and like that inherent level of flexibility is the biggest thing I see folks in your role want. They want to be able to ebb and flow in and out of a scope because, again, nothing is binary. It's very difficult to say to you, hey, Kammie, you're going to pay us X and we're only going to do Y and we're never going to change. You want to be able to say, well, like our business change or there's seasonality or economy sucks and we need to scale back, like you want to be able to meander through stuff and not have every time an agency comes to you with an idea, it be associated with a price tag. So yeah, I've seen across basically all service lines, that kind of being like what I hear at least.
Yeah, I think agility and personalization, like you're getting a higher touch experience when you're working with a smaller agency. I don't want to use the word hungry because I think it's kind of stupid, but they're just more personal. They're going to handle, especially if you're a bigger client. But in general, like they're not stuck to those corporate structures that so many agencies are. That was surprising for me because you say I did come from, at our largest, we had about 70 employees. So, that's a bigger agency, but we weren't like network owned or anything like that. My first time working with network owned was when I was working at a bank. And that was really kind of mind blowing to me because it is very corporate. Their timelines move very slow. And yeah, a lot of times you do need somebody that's going to be a lot more responsive, especially when you're dealing with sort of like the social issues that we went through over the past couple of years where you're like, I want to pull out of this channel because brand safety is a huge conversation again because of what's going on at Twitter. But brand safety was a huge conversation around all the social channels. And we knew their policies, but we really looked a lot further into that and being able to access somebody and get things pulled. Our website was down the other day and I didn't know why. And I emailed my media partner in the middle of the night and he checked it and stopped it. And I don't want him having to check mail after night, but it was nice that he did. You're not going to get that kind of service. They're going to say, oh, it takes us 72 hours to make actions like that. Or it takes us 6 weeks to turn around a strategy for $100,000. Why? And a lot of them are offshoring services too, which can impact your quality of service. It's efficient, but you got to weigh the good and the bad when you make those decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. Prior to this agency search, can you think of a really positive agency experience that you've had?
Yeah, I think anytime an agency can kind of like get in the boat with you and like figure out, like work together to solve a problem is a great experience. So I worked with really big network agencies at my last job, but we, after going through a couple of account directors, landed on one who was really in it to figure out how to make the relationship work and how to improve our business. And really took the time and set aside her very busy schedule to talk to me and to figure out how we needed to move forward. Because I managed our media and measurement partners at my big bank job. That was one of my roles. So when a relationship wasn't going right, or we weren't, they weren't meeting the needs of the scope, that was on me to figure out. So I think, yeah, we worked on the relationship. We tried to diagnose what the problems were, how we could create efficiencies, where we could adjust our scope and make recommendations. So I think anytime somebody that's willing to treat your business like their own, it makes a really big difference. And another reason why I think, people are going probably towards smaller agencies is that they're just more invested, because it's less of a corporate, we're just pulling this lever and making this change and taking orders, and more of a personalization. They feel more invested in your business.
Yeah, it's interesting. Whenever I ask, and we'll talk about negative in a second, like whenever I ask about positive agency experiences, or when I've been complimented when I was at my former agency, or negative agency experiences, everybody in your role, not a single person, positive or negative, references the actual work, which you didn't either. Everything is around process, communication, timeliness, not missing deadlines, or if deadlines were missed for some reason, communicating why, like this is what's going on and this won't happen again and stuff like that, which I find really interesting, because in the context of what I do, when agencies, at least now, like I'm in a good spot where I can be super selective of agencies that I work with and put my name behind. So many agencies, like the first words out of their mouth when we talk are like, we're the best at X. And I immediately like shut down, because I'm like, no, you're not. And even if you are, you're not necessarily the best, you're like more right. Like I firmly believe there are many agencies who are really good at certain things. 80% of those wouldn't be right for you, for example. Like a very small subset of those are right for a particular situation, a particular budget, a particular client and stuff like that. So I just think it's interesting that even at my old job, like, we would get to the end of these things, and even those super positive ones, it was never like, oh, this website is gorgeous. It was like, man, that was such a long process. Like, thanks for bringing food and making it like a light process, and like making my life easier during it, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that sentiment?
100%. And I think it's what makes you satisfied. I think it's satisfied in any professional relationship is the communication, the process, and how well you feel respected by the people that you're working with, and you respect them. So I think that satisfaction at your like internal as well as external partnerships. And it's honestly, that's probably great advice. And I love the way you articulated that, is that like 80% of the agencies out there maybe be able to do what you did. You're not the best at something, but it's how you set yourself apart and finding the right partners. So making sure that people understand you and your business so that they can work with you. I mean, a lot of people have experience in manufacturing or banking or all these different, they want to set themselves apart with having experience in your specific industry, but I'm much more interested in how you operate and how you think. Because at the end of the day, I'm hiring you because of your agency specialization. Like our job is to manufacture products. I need to know that you can help us sell them.
The work is also so subjective, which is why when people evaluate, so like I don't think I did with you either, but when people ask, which is sometimes people are like, oh, I trust you, make intros after we chat. And some are like, oh, can we see like a portfolio, or can you share the name of the agencies and the websites? And I always push back, because I think it's I understand that they want to see it, but I'm like, have the conversation, then ask them for the portfolio. Because again, like I get it all the time, like, oh, we saw this on the website, we hated it. I'm like, that was made for that client. They presumably loved it. Like, to your point, you want to know their thinking of how they arrived at that to arrive at what you want. But like somebody saying, oh, I love this website, I hate this website. Like that piece of me died a long time ago, sitting in meetings where we like debated the color and shades of like a yellow, where I'd be like, what are we doing right now? Like, don't we want to know?
But do we know
like,
that because we were agency people? Because we know that that the changes that you make and the concessions that you make because the client is just putting their foot down, and you some point have to put your creative integrity aside and say, this is your product and you're paying for it. So to hold somebody 100%. Accountable for their portfolio is super challenging, because you have no idea what that client wanted.
100%. And I also have said it many times to people. I'm like, in the context of design, like, do you care what this thing looks like if people click and buy? And most of the time it's, of course, no, within reason. But I'm like, then why are we still talking about like this button color? Let's put out the button color. We'll see if people click it. We'll change it if no one clicks the button. Like people get so wrapped up in that.
The minutia.
Yeah, that's how creative people die. Truthfully, I
Yeah.
feel like I've seen the life come out of designers in those conversations of like, we're still talking about like this bar or like the thickness of this line.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are we doing?
Mm-hmm.
On the flip side, can you think of a bad agency experience that you've had and what made it negative?
Yeah.
That sounded like a heavy sigh.
I told you I'm not going to trauma dump. I mean, I think just anytime an agency is too stubborn, they're not listening to you and their needs. Maybe they're pushing something that is the next big innovation in data and marketing, but if your company's not ready for it, or it's just not a match for the audience, then it doesn't matter. So I think a lot of times you just get people that are so eager and enthusiastic. And I love that enthusiasm, but it has to come with limits that you say, all right, this isn't the right client to match this with. So, everyone wants to talk about account-based marketing, myself included, and people-based marketing, and the cookie's going to die according to Google, but then they keep pushing back the deadline for that. So all those innovations are really important, but at the end of the day, you need to meet your partner where they are or pull them along very gently. So.
Yeah, I think that goes back to like knowing your audience. I think one of the most difficult parts of agency sales / account management is when to push and when to stop pushing. Of like you said, eventually you have to make a concession and say like, look, this is your budget and stuff. You have to know the line of like, we strongly disagree, but at the end of the day, like this is your decision, but also like presenting ideas without it always being associated with a dollar amount. So like a strategy we use in my former agency was like, we'd come with ideas that worked within the current scope. Like, hey, we want to try this, but like, let's take out these 2 other things so we don't have to like charge you more, change budget, stuff like that, which was usually received well. But yeah, there are some brands, truthfully, that just, I talk about it with agencies all the time. Like, I don't think they're ready for quote unquote cool. They don't need the big shiny thing. I see all these brands like we're going to talk about it in a second, like jumping into like NFT and metaverse. I'm like, chill out. Like, you do not have to. I'm all for testing and stuff, but like I think getting a little ridiculous of like every time something new. Like I got asked for somebody who specializes in Be Real, and I was like, nobody specializes in Be Real yet. It just started. We're a day in. Like nobody can specialize, like, you see that in like job descriptions sometimes of like, oh, we want somebody with like 10 years of TikTok experience. I'm like, well, if you find them, let me know because they're lying, stuff like that. So I think to your point, like knowing your client super well is more important.
On the flip side of that is that I've also worked with agencies that have had really long-term relationships with the brands that I've worked with. And they've reached, I don't know if they're complacent agencies in general, or if they are complacent because it's such a long-term relationship. It's so predictable that they just don't challenge the norm. They're just getting it done. So the relationship is quality, but it's lost its luster. So I also really don't like, you have to meet personally. But I had peers that were like, I love that I know what to expect from this agency. And I was like, but
you don't want to rock the boat if you think things are good. It's tough. I've been in that situation where I've worked with clients for several years. Yeah, you get brand fatigue, truthfully. Like that's why I can't remember who I just saw recently. One of the big holding companies agencies has been working with a brand I was reading about for like 30 years in some capacity. I'm like, how the hell is that even like that's so rates, it's hard for agencies to keep brands for a year these days.
Yeah. We had a client, I think our longest client at my last agency was, my longest time at my last agency was 20 years, 25 years, 20 years. And it was the first client. And then their CEO retired, a new one came in and he fired us. Whereas like it had been all internal people that had kept the agency on board previous to that. And then my first agency, I mean, they've got clients that they've had for like 50 years. To which I hate to say, like, you should get a new agency every 3 to 5 years when you're if you are using a retainer agency for like creative services and media and things like that. I don't want to say you should get a new one every 3 to 5 years, but I do think it's important to RFP if that's not a mandate by your organization.
I hate RFP. So no. I think they should explore. I just hate the RFP process.
I know. I hate it. And I would absolutely for me in 2017 would be like, stop talking. But
wasn't my process, not to toot my own horn, wasn't our process significantly easier and you got to know the agencies better than an RFP process? That's why I think what I do holds merit, because I think the RFP process is cold and it doesn't give you, I'm all for structure and a level playing field and providing all that stuff. But I think it's just like, it's so ridiculous oftentimes and so drawn out and such overkill that like you forget, like, let's just have a conversation. I can remember pitching Waffle House many, many years ago, and we were in the RFP process, and we asked if we could have a call first. And they were like, no, we want to pitch.
Yeah.
And we were like, what do you want us to pitch on? We haven't talked. It's like, we're happy to pitch. We'd love to be in the room. It's a huge opportunity for us. We ultimately won the opportunity. But yeah, like it was such a new concept to be like, you want to talk to us? We were like, we don't know how else to do it. You know, like we have to talk to know what the presentation is going to be. So like, I think that dichotomy of structure versus like overkill is just wild. I think it's why I'm good at what I do, because I haven't had the huge agency experience of in that world. So like, I'm like, that's so foreign to me, you know? So I'm just like, let's have a conversation, like figure out what you want.
Well, and like if they're answering an RFP, they're filling out, you know, form questions. Are you really, to your point, getting to know them and their relationship? And I had some bad relationships when I was at the big bank with some agencies that it just wasn't a match at the end of the day, or the person that was assigned to our account once they won the business wasn't a match. And then we also we had one of the agencies, a very large agency, but not network owned, sent in their RFP answers with the notes still showing.
Oh,
I know.
No.
And it was like, but their answers weren't bad, but it was just like, it reflected so poorly on leadership that they were like,
were they like talking shit though?
Or? And I'm like, this could have been some poor intern, and they have no idea they even did this.
Was there anything like bad in there though?
No, it was just like, they just didn't remove the edits, being like, change this. They're wasn't,
like, God, Kammie sucks. Do we even want this account?
Yeah.
Like, unbelievable.
Yeah, it reflected so poorly on leadership. And I was like, that really stinks, because we have no idea who submitted this final product. It might not be the people we work with, but at the end of the day, that was also a huge mistake on their part.
I had somebody, who was that? I wouldn't say them regardless, because I'm going to blow up their spot. But somebody told me, this was like last year, I want to say, one of their agency partners, they were doing like a creative refresh of something. And I've heard some agencies do this, so I don't fault the process. They went to like Fiverr to get like 30 concepts as like a starting point for themselves, you know? And we're of course never supposed to like send that out. And they sent it. It had like the Fiverr logo on the presentation or something like that. They were like, what is this? They're like, oh my God, you were never supposed to see that. We're so mortified. They were like, are you using a Fiverr person like for our account? You know, it was like this whole thing. I was like, sheesh.
Your budget is what? And you use Fiverr?
Yeah, they're making like a 99% margin. It's the most profitable account ever. Once an agency relationship has turned sour or negative, do you think it's salvageable? I take the opinion kind of, but not really. I think once the seed of doubt has been planted, you can still work together, but it's never going to be the same. If it's a big enough thing, I think at the beginning it's normal to like have a couple like missteps because you're getting to know each other. Yeah, but after like 3 or 6 months, like I think it's hard to get back to level footing. What do you think there?
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. If somebody's opinion has soured, now again, like I think I'm different because I've been inside an agency and I know how, these things work, and you could just been given the wrong account partner. But in my experience, it's been once the relationship's gone south, you've lost trust. And so it doesn't really matter who you get assigned, if they change up your team. So yeah.
Sure.
It's tough when you're dealing with retainers too.
Yeah, it's hard to break up, especially if you're providing multiple service lines. We talked about it a little bit, but what are you most bullish on in the marketing space? I mentioned NFTs and all that sort of world. There are in-person events are, I think, for the most part, like back to somewhat normalcy. What are you most excited about?
Oh, I don't know. Not NFTs. Or the metaverse. But I'm in such right now I'm in such a traditional space, which is not to say that you can't do something interesting in the traditional space, but we're B2B. We're working with people in the manufacturing industry. So I don't think they're going to be like, I'm going to go to the metaverse.
That's where our next podcast interview is going to be.
Manufacturing partners to find some high-end building materials.
You meet your customers where you are. Perfectly fine answer. What do you most again, I don't think the word boring gets a bad reputation. And I think it's okay to be boring. If your
sometimes boring is effective. We're just trying to be good with our money here.
Yeah. So what are you excited about in your world though? Are you guys participating in trade shows and stuff like that?
Yeah, so we
Or
did go back to a trade show for the first time in several years recently, and it was a great experience.
Good.
My coordinator went. We have an incredible sales team, an incredible customer success team, and customer engagement. So getting them out there, like they're our best, the cheesy thing of like your people are your best asset. But it is true, especially in our industry where we provide great support beyond just the sale for installation and customer service. So getting those faces out there, building those relationships, I think it made a really big difference. My coordinator went, and it was great exposure for her in understanding our audiences and understanding their needs. So getting back out to trade shows, I think is going to be a very exciting thing. I still like print, but again, because we're in the building industry and architecture, there's some magazines and some publications that are really great partners that are still very successful. If I was just going with like People Magazine and, I don't think I'd be talking about that. But if we're talking about Architectural Digest and publications like that, that people really spend time with, I think that it's still really effective for us. So again, I like brand marketing. So
I think FireRock should sponsor the You Should Talk To podcast for like 25 or 30 grand a month. I think it'd be a really good use of funds for you
my
guys.
budgets. Do you think I can afford that?
I'll give you a discount. We can talk.
Let's work on a
after.
new quote.
Yeah. What keeps you up at night from a marketing or business standpoint?
Measurement, kind of. I mean, we've got CPAs that we can tie to, but figuring out how we're optimizing off of those, is it coming, a lot of it's going to come from search, but how are we going to optimize that and make it better? Yeah, measurement stresses me out, especially we're private equity owned. So we do need to be very accountable for our dollars. So I have to advocate for brand marketing, but what do I say? I can say, this is the income of the circulation, or this is the audience, the industries of the audience and things like that. But it's, finding ways to tie back and validate those investments is super important. So measurement tends to keep me up.
Yeah, it's easier for me to say because it's not my money and I'm not privately or private equity backed. But my answer when people ask me that occasionally is typically like, I would tell them like, this is something we have to do in some capacity, and we're going to do our best to be efficient. But like, I do talk to plenty of marketers who try to like tap dance around and try to do like attribution models for like brand stuff that's just like, one of my, I guess, hot takes is like, stop measuring everything. And of course, I know you have to measure as much as possible. And I'm a firm believer what's measured is managed, but like, you just don't get to try enough stuff, I think. If you just have to attribute everything to $1 in or $1 out or something like that.
I completely agree. That was a frustration for me when I was at the bank. Was there are good ideas, like not silly ideas, not let's just try like influencer marketing. Like that's not new. And a lot of our competitors were in that space already, but because we weren't sure how to measure it and measure it specifically to CPA, we kind of dragged our feet on that a little bit. And then don't even get me started on legal because they hated it. But yeah, that was really frustrating because you just sometimes have to get into the space if you're maybe validate it a little bit by saying our peers are doing it for a reason. Let's just maybe trust that they did the research and that it's worth doing. But
yeah, well, I will stop triggering you now. We'll finish with a couple fun ones. What was your very first job, either growing up or high school, college?
Oh, I was a lifeguard and a swim coach.
Do you think?
And if I won the lottery, I'd be a swim coach again, probably.
Do you think that you that prepared you in any way for what you do today?
Oh, I mean, working
you're not
with
having
children.
to rescue.
Yeah, I mean, listen, learning how to articulate yourself, and us being communications majors at Clemson, like learning how to articulate yourself as simply as possible is very important, especially when you're dealing with complex concepts like data and digital media that my peers don't need to understand in a most complicated fashion. They need to understand it from a very high level. So that is probably something that I did learn with dealing with children. Like they don't need to understand exactly how the technicality of why their stroke needs to be this way. I just need to figure out how to communicate to them to get their stroke in the right form. So that's true. But then also being a communication major at Clemson and thinking through like how people think and how to communicate and how to influence people was a great experience that I think has made me a different marketer than it would be if I had gone the traditional marketing and the business school direction.
Did you graduate in 2008 as well? We graduated the same class?
Yeah.
It's funny. I remember not knowing what I wanted to like be when I grow up type thing, and sitting in orientation, and I can't remember who it was, either the president or, somebody high up at Clemson was like, oh, I'm there with my parents. They're like, oh, if you don't know what you want to be, you should be a communications major. Like, you can do anything. And I'm like, great, this is perfect. I do it. I maintain, and again, Clemson was the best 4 years of my life, but like, I don't know that it probably made me a better writer. I think you're probably, it helped in that department for sure.
Yeah.
But like all of our tests, if I remember correctly, was like, if you could prove your opinion, you got an A,
yeah.
It's not like we were taking multiple
You take
choice tests.
Mahala's, what was her name? Mahala Vorvano? Is that how you pronounced it? She taught a social media class at Clemson in 2007. And if I recall, she said at the time that was one of 5 classes that were being offered about social media, but she had to call it PR and the internet.
Oh, I think I did take that actually. Yeah, that sounds
It was
familiar.
like, I don't know where she was from, but she was like a short woman with like short black hair. We held class on Twitter. So I've had Twitter for 15 years, I guess.
You've been in the metaverse. You were in the metaverse first.
No, we held class on Second Life. We were in the metaverse. Do you remember Second Life?
The only reason I know Second Life is because there's a Law and Order episode where like somebody was like killing people in Second Life. So shows how much I studied in college. I'm like, I think I was watching Law and Order that day.
People will often remember there was a gag on The Office where Dwight was really depressed because when Angela and Dwight broke up, and he went and got really invested in his Second Life character, which was literally just him. Like he was not fantasizing being anything else. I think it was just Dwight. But we held class on Second Life one time, or maybe several times, and it was during the 2008 primaries. So we went to like Hillary Clinton had an island. So there was islands, and they had money called Linden dollars. I had forgotten all this, but recently had a conversation with somebody where it all came back. So
are these Shroot bucks?
Kind of, yeah, I guess. It was the reason money. And we went to Hillary Clinton's island and Barack Obama's island, and like Coke at your Pepsi. Like we went to like some big brands had islands, and we're like testing into the space.
I mean, I had no idea you were such a pioneer of Web3. So we really strayed. All I was going to say about the communication department was they told me I could do anything. And when we graduated in 2008 and I was interviewing, people would be like, well, what can you do? I'm like, I have no clue. Go ask Clemson. They told me I can do anything. They're like, yeah, like, communication is kind of general. I'm like, like, go chat with them. Like, I graduated. I did it. And yeah, they took me. I was
told if I got a degree, you would give me a job.
Yeah, the biggest lie we were ever told. The biggest lie we were all ever told.
Yeah. But to this class, so I changed we wrote like thesis. Do we call them thesis? But I ended up writing my like thesis after that class on CEOs who were like blogging or on Twitter, and how that affected the public perception of their company. So them becoming personalities representing their company, which is so interesting now, dealing with like Elon literally.
You should have bought Twitter. You should have bought
I wish I could find this paper. It was very good.
I'm dying to read your senior thesis. Please send that over at a later date.
It was listen, cutting edge in 2008. But then I ended up getting my first agency job was as a social media planner. So that's sort of how I moved into the agency world, because I hadn't really considered agency life. I wanted to sort of work in like event marketing, maybe.
I was in-house social media for an automotive retailer in 2009. So like that was when social was not a thing. They're like, oh, this guy can do anything on the internet. I'm like, But yeah, I played on Facebook most of the day.
Yeah.
Wild times.
I was like, yeah, I can write a content calendar and Google Docs. Sure. So and that was my first job because of that class. So, and now,
Sweet. Shout out Clemson.
Shout out to Clemson. Very innovative.
What would your final meal be if you had to pick?
It would be seafood.
Be a little more specific, Kammie.
Sushi?
We talking? I mean, what are we talking here?
Oh God.
A big hunk of you can't just say seafood in general.
I don't know. You're killing me here. I like steak. I just don't think it would be steak, but it would be like really good. Maybe like a twice baked potato.
You just said seafood, and now we're on a twice baked potato.
I don't know. Like, well, I'm talking sides now. Maybe like, are you familiar with Royal Reds? Do you know what those are? One of my clients was a seafood commission. Royal Reds are shrimp from very, very, very deep in the Gulf. Very, very cold water, very, very salty water. And they are delicious. It's like the lobster of the Gulf. So maybe like a good, like grilled Royal Red shrimp situation. Oh, shrimp and grits, maybe.
Okay. Totally fair. We're not here to judge.
I don't know. You caught me off guard with that one.
I'm sorry. That's what we're here for, to catch people off guard.
But I'm like almost always ready to talk about food. So
me too, clearly. My final question for you is, who is somebody who inspires you, either personally or professionally?
Oh, gosh.
Don't say somebody from the Clemson University marketing program.
No, I'm not going to say like, what if I was like Dabo? So lame. That would be so lame.
I would cut that. I wouldn't ask. I wouldn't put that here.
I don't know. I mean, is it really lame if I say like Tina Fey? Like, I love Tina Fey's book. I love her career. She's an incredible writer.
Love it.
She's found her way in a space as a woman. She works really well with men. She's earned the respect of men, but she's not left women behind, which very often we see women that get to the top sort of do it by just sort of single-handedly looking out for themselves and not each other. She still creates media that appeals to women. So her and Mindy Kaling as well create a lot of media that appeal to women, but without it feeling like they're playing down or like becoming the joke. So those are two people that I really respect.
Love it. Kammie, thank you for joining us today. If anybody does want to send you a mediocre or great pitch, I presume LinkedIn is going to be the best way to find you. Wouldn't dream of putting your email on the screen or anything like that.
Please do. But you can reach out, find us at FireRock.us if you're interested in reaching out to us or for media or for our products. And then, find me on LinkedIn. I do check it. I just haven't checked it this morning. I'll do it now, though.
Oh, yeah. You have a tag for me about this podcast. But thank you very much.
I'm worthy of your time and of your medium. So
absolutely. We will talk again soon, I hope.
Yeah.
Thank you for checking out this episode of You Should Talk To. This show is brought to you by the company with the same name, You Should Talk To, a company that helps marketing leaders find the right agency or freelancer for their situation. If you enjoyed what you learned in this episode, make sure to follow You Should Talk To wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, or visit YouShouldTalkTo.com for more information.